today we are diving into a huge question in education, and we're going to use some fascinating research that pretty much flips a common assumption on its head. We are exploring the SAT's fairness paradox, and we're going to see why, when you're talking about fairness, averages can be incredibly misleading.
So let's start with the big one, right? It's one of the most high-stakes questions out there. I mean, for decades, we've all been asking this. Are standardized tests like the SAT actually fair? Do they predict how well you'll do in college equally, no matter your gender or your ethnicity?
You know, for a long time, the official answer from these huge studies has been pretty consistent. If you lump all the data together, from hundreds of schools, hundreds of thousands of students, you find that, on average, there's not much predictive bias. When you zoom way, way out, the tests seem to be doing their job. But what if that average is hiding a much messier, more complicated truth?
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to unpack the big problem with using averages to even talk about fairness. Then we'll introduce a totally new way of looking at the data, a lens that shows a startlingly different picture. From there, we'll dig into why the results are so all over the place, before we land on this really powerful takeaway. Fairness is fundamentally a local issue.
Okay, so let's get right to the heart of this paradox. To really get it, we have to challenge this whole idea of on average. What does that phrase actually hide? Because in statistics, just like in life, an average can totally smooth over some really dramatic differences.
This old quote just nails the problem perfectly. Statistics can tell us that, hey, on average, everything's fine, even when the reality for the actual individuals is completely different. One person's full, the other is starving, but the average says they're both doing okay. That is the exact illusion we're talking about with SAT fairness on a national scale. So let's apply this to college admissions. Just imagine College A, where the SAT overpredicts the grades for a certain group of students. Now picture College B, where for that exact same group, the SAT underpredicts their grades. Well, if you just mix the data from both schools together, those two opposite biases can completely cancel each other out. And all of a sudden, the national average looks perfectly fair. It's that half a loaf of bread illusion, and it's masking what's really happening at each school. Okay, before we go any further, let's just nail down a key term. The formal name for this issue is differential prediction. It's what happens when a test, like the SAT, doesn't predict an outcome, like your first-year GPA, in the same way for different groups of students. This is the technical thing that researchers are looking for when they talk about predictive bias.
And this is where the research we're looking at gets really, really clever. Instead of just calculating the average bias like everyone else, the researchers asked a much deeper question. They said, what if we stop looking at the average and we start looking at the variation? They built a new lens to see if fairness is even consistent from one college to the next.
They called this new idea differential prediction generalization. I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the concept is actually simple and kind of brilliant. It just asks, does fairness generalize? Is the way the SAT predicts success for different groups the same at a tiny liberal arts college in the Northeast as it is at a giant state university in the Southwest? Or does it change? So they dug into data from 176 colleges and over 500,000 students to find out.
So what did they see? What happened when they actually looked through this new lens? When they stopped caring about the average and started focusing on the differences between all these schools?
Okay, so remember, the old method gives us a really simple picture, a nearly flat line, which suggests, hey, not much bias on average. But when the researchers plotted the data for every single one of the 348 student samples from those 176 universities, the picture changed, well, dramatically. Instead of one clean line, they got this. Yeah, it's a tangled mess. Researchers call this a spaghetti plot. Each one of those colored lines is a different college sample. Some lines slope up, meaning the test overpredicts success for a group. Some slope down, meaning it underpredicts. But the key is they are all over the place. This one visual tells the whole story. The idea of a single, stable, average fairness, it's a myth. The reality is this wild, chaotic variation.
And this is not just some abstract data visualization. I mean, think about it. If you're a student and your potential is being underpredicted at your dream school, it doesn't really matter that, on average, the test is fair, right? Each one of these lines represents real students and real futures. And the scale of this variation is just staggering.
Let's put some real numbers on this. Just looking at gender and the SAT math section, the study found that nearly 78,000 students went to a college where the test predicted grades differently for men and women.
That is a huge number of people whose actual experience defies that whole fair on average story.
And it gets even bigger. When comparing Black and white students, the data showed that over 132,000 students were at schools where high school GPA, another really important admissions tool, predicted their college performance differently. I mean, that's the population of a small city right there.
And you see the same pattern when you look at Hispanic versus white students in high school GPA. The analysis found over 86,000 students were at institutions where this kind of predictive variation was happening. So when you add it all up, it is crystal clear. This is not some small niche problem. This is a massive, widespread thing affecting hundreds of thousands of students.
So, of course, this leads to the next massive question. If fairness isn't some universal property of the test itself, what is causing this incredible variation from one campus to the next? What is going on at the local level that makes everything so chaotic?
Well, what could be causing all this? The answer seems to be a bunch of different factors that are unique to each individual campus. It could be stuff like stereotype threat, which might be stronger in one school's culture, or maybe it's different grading standards, or the quality of student mentoring, or even just the kinds of courses that different students are encouraged to take. Any one of these local factors can completely change how well a test score predicts a student's actual grades. All of this, every tangled line on that chart, it all points to the study's one central, incredibly powerful conclusion. And it's one that really reframes how we should be thinking about test fairness.
And here it is. This is the big takeaway. Test fairness is not some universal constant you can just declare from a national report. It is a local phenomenon. It depends on the specific context, the culture, and the practices of each individual college. A university can't just assume a test is fair for its students because some national average says so. The only way to know for sure is to look at their own data.
And that leaves us with this final, really profound question to chew on. The whole point of a standardized test is to have a common, reliable yardstick that means the same thing for everyone, everywhere. But if this research shows that a test's predictive fairness changes this dramatically from one campus to the next, what does standardized really even mean?